Good morning, Dr. Maher. Welcome to TeaTalk.
Thank you. Good morning.
Oh my God, I don't know, ma'am, where to start because it's been almost 2 decades that we last met. So at that time, in the University of Nebraska at Omaha, but I'm like, words are failing me. I don't know where to start, how to start. I don't have any, I don't know. I don't have words to express how I'm feeling right now. So could you please kindly tell us a little bit about yourself to our audience?
Happy to do so. I just want to say, when we last saw each other, you were in a big transition, trying to move your family to North America. Um, and I was trying to help you get status in the United States, and that didn't work. And it was such a relief to know that you were able to go to Canada and get a toehold into what must have been a very difficult transition for everyone, to start all over again across the Pacific Ocean. Um, and I have just been so impressed watching your development as a scholar and a teacher over these years since we saw each other, gaining your PhD, developing your own sort of entrepreneurial consultancy, bringing up your sons, watching your dog or dogs. I don't know if I've been watching one or two, but you were at a crossroads. It was a very important moment in your life when we parted ways, and it was such a relief to watch your growth and your family's growth, from a distance, but to watch that. And it was, we've benefited in a sense that Facebook got developed during that time. And so we were able to at least keep in touch that way. So, just a little bit of information about me for anyone who's going to be listening in. I'm originally from the East Coast of the United States. I grew up in the shadow of New York City, and then the first part of my childhood was spent in northern New Jersey, and then my family moved to upstate New York in Syracuse, which is where I graduated from high school in Liverpool, New York. Went on to college, first in Albany, New York, and then my graduate work started in South Carolina, ended at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And at that point in my life, I was starting my family. It's kind of where you were when you had a son, but your family is bigger than you and your son, and you have husband and other sons and extended family. I was starting my family about that time. And so I took time away from teaching and from the academic world, only taught a little bit part time when my children were young, and went back full time 30, 33 years ago now, 1991. Can't believe it's been that long. And that's when my academic career resumed. And I was teaching at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, and spent a good part of my working life there. Um, I departed in 2010. By that point, I was full professor and took a job as a dean of a college of liberal arts at University of Minnesota Duluth, and made that move in 2010. And at this point have been almost 15 years here. So my career has really been sort of divided in half between my years in Omaha, Nebraska, and now my years in northern Minnesota. And when you knew me, I was developing my scholarship in sort of the environmental humanities on sort of Western American and Canadian writers like Willa Cather and Wallace Stegner and Margaret Lawrence and others. And that continues to be my focus in my literary scholarship. But in the classroom, I still remain very much uh, a generalist. I teach what my department needs me to teach, and that has always sort of been what I've done for my departments. I have my training from Wisconsin that was in all of American literature and the long 19th century of British literature. And those continue to be the areas that I teach in. I'll be doing a special course on British literature this next spring coming up, probably focusing in on Oscar Wilde. But I have also taught early American literature and other American lit courses and more general world and intro to lit kinds of things. So I see myself as filling in gaps because my training was very eclectic. So that in a nutshell, and I am a mom. My two children, son and daughter, are all grown up and they live on the West Coast. And my grandchildren are out there in Bellingham, Washington, where my son is, and Portland, Oregon, where my daughter is. And she just had her first baby and added a little grandson, Vincent, to the family. So that's kind of in a nutshell me.
Yes, ma'am. So much honored simply having your presence today. And as I have asked, as I have requested, this would be the best birthday gift for me. Yesterday was my birthday, and I'm so much humbled and honored having you, ma'am. Thank you.
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you so much. Talking this podcast, ma'am, I talk about, or we talk about wellness, health, and all these areas. And when you mentioned, or when we are talking about like 2 decades ago, in past 2 decades, I haven't seen a bit of change in you. That is first thing I would like to, I don't know, you are just the same glow that you have. And as you mentioned, at that time, when I was your student, I do remember the class, Maya Antonia, Stone Angel, what you were teaching. When I was in that class, I was simply spellbound. And when I'm talking about wellness today, I do remember I was in my late 20s. Physically, I was very well, but emotionally, was I? Mentally, was I? Socially, was I? I ask many times. But being in your class, seeing you teach, giving all of the student what you love giving, in that sense, you're not only healing us, inspiring us, encouraging us, but you're taking those multiple roles as a professor, as an inspirer, as a teacher, as a healer, as a doctor. So during those periods, your words, your expression, your own presence, those are the factors that help me to grow as a person I am today. So I want to thank you for that. In your opinion, ma'am, what is wellness?
Oh, I think it's something that you have to look at very holistically, right? Because you said that you were physically well, but in other areas, your life did not feel like it was coming together.
Right.
And I think true wellness is when you have that integration of the mental, the spiritual, the physical, right? It's not enough just to take care of your body, to do whatever exercise or other kind, watching diet and all of that we do to try to keep our bodies as well as we can through life. But, and I know that you're also interested in positivity and how one maintains that, because it is at times in life challenging, right? We all have to face losses that can be terribly upsetting and can send us into long periods of grieving. Since I've known you, I've lost my mother, I've lost my father, I've lost multiple pets. Um, I was divorced from my first husband. I'm now happily married to my second. Um, but if your relationships aren't working, that's another thing that can affect your sense of wellness. And whether reconciling within a relationship or having to leave a relationship, both of those are very difficult. And so I think my life, like many people's lives, has had its ups and downs. I think temperamentally, I'm just a natural optimist. And optimists do have better outcomes in life, whether that's something that I've developed as I've matured from childhood. So I was a very, very intensely shy child. I cried a lot. I didn't like to be apart from my mother, right? I wasn't a very good prospect to be, a self-sufficient adult later on, but somehow or other I gained those skills and gained confidence to do things on my own, and to be able to grow, away from the dependency I felt on my family. But that took me quite a while because I was really a very shy person to begin with. But I wasn't a negative person, and I didn't always look at things from a cynical or um, anticipating the worst all the time. My kids call me the worst scenario mom. I do tend to project ahead and worry about, but I think that's being a mom, right? Um, but as a person, I tend to look for the best in other people. I don't tend to um, think about larger humanity in a negative sense. I think most people are good people and want to live good lives, and they want to love and be loved, and contribute in important ways to their families and communities. That's how most people are, in my opinion. But I know plenty of misanthropes in life, and I know plenty of people who always expect the worst. And I don't know if some of that is just hardwired into us when we're born. But I've always tried to keep a more optimistic look on things. And I think science shows that people who can do that are actually able to deal with life's challenges. And when hard and painful things happen, long term you're able to climb out of those moments in life more effectively than people who simply go through those kinds of challenges as just evidence of how awful, right, the world is. I have never felt that way. It's not that I don't worry about what's going on to the planet, what's going on politically in the United States. All of those things are very concerning. But, you know, and, as you know, if you've been following me on Facebook, I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer, in 2021. And so it's been 3 years since that diagnosis now. And I'm just fortunate to have been diagnosed during a period when all kinds of sciences contributing to much longer outcomes for people with all blood cancers, right? Not just mine. But I do think that when you then have that kind of disease challenge, your mental attitude is everything. And being loved and loving others is important, and having a spiritual core is important. So I think more than anything, my cancer experience has just reinforced that whole holistic approach, um, to my idea of wellness, right? Because with little grandchildren now, I don't want them not to know me in some sense. uh, so staying as well as I can, and I'm in remission now, so essentially I'm cancer free. How long that lasts is the challenge, right? But I know that there are therapies waiting for me that will help put me back in remission. My cancer can be managed that way long term. There are plenty of people who have lived 20 or 30 years with my cancer. Um, And again, that's just an example of me thinking positively, right? I am going to be one of those people. And so far, my experience has validated, I guess, my optimism about where I am at this point. I'm 69 years old. I was in my 30s, I think, when I was teaching you, and maybe early 40s. That's a lot of time. And it's the point in life where a lot of things can be challenging, right? You're worrying about your children and their education and their social life. Um, Marriages go through their ups and downs. Moving any place is stressful. And you've been to quite a few places in the last 20 years. So I know that you've also, been, trying to keep your sense of equanimity during some very challenging times. And finding one's way towards that equanimity is one of the big challenges in life. So, anyway, I don't know if that's answered your question at all, but I think of it very holistically. And I know if one of those areas of my life gets banged around a bit, it's going to have an effect on the other things. If I'm physically getting banged around like I have been in the last 3 years, that is going to challenge me mentally and emotionally and spiritually. And if those areas get banged around a bit, they're going to have their effects on my physical health, or the other areas, right? If you're feeling emotionally depressed, emotionally isolated, or whatever during a period of time, that can affect you physically. If I know that there's a connection between grief and later disease in life. And sometimes I wonder, even though there's no proven cause of the blood cancer I have, but it did evolve after I had to deal with the deaths of my parents, and also going through a divorce. And I think that when you have deep emotional losses like that, they have a real impact on everything else. So I think for me, life is often about trying to get back to that sense of confidence and balance and happiness, right? Happiness as a concept, to me, it's a more ephemeral thing. It's wanting to feel joy, which I think is a deeper emotional experience. Wanting to be in a place where when joy comes to me, I can accept it, I can recognize it, right? And cherish it and savor it. And then it becomes part of your memory bank. And I think memory is a very important part of holistic health as well. So those are some of my thoughts.
Yes, ma'am. And probably, as you mentioned, that in last 20 years' time, I have gone through like many places, met many people and whatnot. But it's not only the class, the syllabus that I remember, that I have learned from you, but your overall personality, what you are giving at the time beside the coursework. And that always was deep in my heart. And in all these years, probably you are one and only one of that person, ma'am, that I have always put in my thoughts, in my journals, in my writings, and very close to heart. And regarding when you mentioned about your cancer, yes, I have been following you, but as I have written the prayers, thirsts in my journal in those days. And seeing you today, seeing all these years when Facebook started and whatnot, yes, you haven't changed a bit, ma'am. Your smile is very infectious. I would say that if I say it correctly. the glow in your eyes that speak volume, and that positivity that just sours in your overall aura. And yes, holistic way, all those areas, combination of all those that makes who we are. And so tell me a secret, how you keep up, beside your positivity, beside what you do, what is one thing you do for your self-care? Something that adds, I don't know, extra happiness in your face every day, in your life every day.
Well, yeah, it's got two different things that are almost opposite sounding. One, I think, and I think both of us are teachers, and both of us have experienced effective teachers, and both of us have experienced negative teachers, right? And in my experience as a student and then as a teacher with other colleagues, I think that if you're in teaching, in order to be in control of your students or worshiped by your students, if it's a self-serving, selfish kind of reason to be in the profession, that's a bad thing, right? But that we have those colleagues who are like that. For me, part of the joy and part of what I think in my daily life or weekly life is very helpful for me is to focus on others. Um, it shouldn't always be about us. In an American society, we are obsessive about the individual, I think in a way that can make individual lives very, very difficult. Um, if you're always comparing yourself to others or trying to see if you've met the benchmarks that everyone's supposed to, or if you feel like you don't have enough attention, all of those things are very negative long term. They're not going to make you effective as a professional, and they're going to have an impact on your friendships and your family relationships and stuff. And so as a teacher, I always wanted, my goal was to have my students become better than me, smarter than me, more effective than I was, right? I want to see my students grow, and I want to see them become confident and to start contributing professionally. It was never about me being recognized. I wanted my students to grow. And I see that just in my regular life, being able to give or help, to be thinking about other people, to be part of a community. All of that's really important, right? But on the other hand, there's a part of me that's still very introverted. And so part of what brings me some peace in the day or in the week is to make sure that sometimes all I want is quiet, to sit down with a book, um, maybe simply to watch the dog or to pet the cat, and maybe not do anything, right? There's always plenty to do around a house. And for me, sometimes doing housework is a way of just keeping my mind off of more pressing things, because you can become too obsessive sometimes about whatever problems or issues you're trying to resolve or think through or get through. So I mean, I like housework that way because I like work that has a beginning and an end, and it doesn't take a lot of thinking to fold laundry or to wash your floors. All of that's fine, but what really brings me peace is sometimes doing nothing and making sure that I have that. I'm not the kind of person who's going to say, "Oh, I have to get to the gym," right? I'm not. Because I don't have the stamina I did before I went through this cancer stuff. Going to the gym can be hard for me anyway. But I've always kind of hated exercise. I hate to say that. I know that it's good for us and all of that, but I've never been obsessive about it. but I do like to have my peace and quiet where I don't have to have other people needing me or asking for things or requesting my attention. I feel like as teachers, we have to work with human beings all the time in our teaching lives. And to have a moment or a way of stepping out of that where you actually don't have people around you. I try to find those moments in the week. Right now trying to do a lot of reading this summer. It's been very wet and rainy here in northern Minnesota, so we can't get out and do a lot of the gardening that we normally do. Those are perfect days for me, for just sitting down with a book. The dog is lying next to me. I have some peace and quiet for maybe an hour. That's what I like.
Yes, ma'am. And when we're talking about wellness, exercise, meditation, doing nothing, that is real meditation. When you feel the contentment inside, one doesn't have to like sit cross-legged and like close your eyes, and that is not the meditation. In fact, the real meditation is you feel content doing nothing, and that nourishes us within. Sharing from my experience, also from the research and what you have mentioned, ma'am, that is something probably we also do follow, taking time for ourselves. And
One of the more challenging Victorian writers, philosopher Thomas Carlyle. He's an acquired taste, and not everybody will want to spend much time with him. He's a challenging writer. But one of the things I remember from reading him is he warns against what he called too much self-consciousness, and also warned about the tendency in the modern age, because I see Victorians in a sense as really the beginning of people like us who are increasingly caught up in these urbanized spaces, this world of constant information, constant movement, which he thought was very wearying. It was gonna grind down the soul, right? If you allow yourself to constantly be thinking, on the go, gotta do, gotta accomplish. That back then, in the middle part of the 19th century, he could see that was not going to be a healthy way for human beings to live, and he was right. So I often think about his writings and about his warnings about self-consciousness and being too much in yourself, um, and then at the same time too much caught up with rapid change and constant movement and fads and fashions and all of those sorts of things that sort of come and go and they don't have lasting legs, right? um, don't become obsessed with those things. um, and I think ultimately you have to become comfortable in yourself, and you have to like who you are, and you have to be who you are. um, I've always tried to be myself when I'm teaching, not the professor, right? I don't want to play a role. I always feel like I'm a fellow seeker in a classroom. We're in there together to try to understand another person's point of view, their art, their messages, their sort of philosophical and psychological explorations, that we're all in there together. And I'm not the great mind in front of everybody. That's not how I see my role at all, not in the classroom, and not in my private life either.
reading Carlyle 20 years ago, but now I'm understanding the meaning more. Thank you for that.
He's still a very difficult person to read. His writing is so idiosyncratic and unique, in a way that turns a lot of people off. But there's an energy there and insight that I think was that can be very appealing. And he was very insightful about what was happening to people's lives as industrialization and the increasing urbanization of life. He saw what was happening to people and how it was disconnecting us, not just at a community level, but even at a personal level. And there are real negative consequences if one doesn't find ways of countering sort of the forces that swirl around us.
We are almost coming to the last part of our program. But ma'am, is there anything I forgot to ask and you'd like to share to the audience watching from everywhere? So I would be humbled to have your message for everyone.
Um, not not really. um, I'm more interested in knowing what you feel like you've learned at this point in your life. You know, I'm at a point in my life, and because of everything that I've been facing, you know, where my mortality is looming larger than it might have 30 years ago. Um, I've also decided that I can't be thinking about that all the time. We can't predict when we're going to be leaving this physical world. And and so I want to enjoy myself, embrace my passions, see my grandchildren, see my children, still have some adventures and travel, uh, you know, enjoy simple things like cooking, which is very creative, and which my husband does so much better than I do, by the way. So I do more of the enjoying of the cooking. But I love to watch cooking shows for some reason. I'm not a very proficient cook myself, but I love watching people creating things and bringing that pleasure to others. Um, so, you know, and I'm probably going to be retiring in 2 years. So I've been thinking a lot about just how it is that we get through changes in our lives and make those adjustments. And I think you can't fight the change, and you have to find ways of adapting. And, um, you know, and you have to find ways so you're not sort of buttressed all the time or thrown around by change and by uh, other things that are happening. That can be really challenging, right? I'm really worried about the fate of democracy right now. Um, but in a way, there's only so much I can do as a person, right? Um, so I try to keep that in perspective, even though it feels very urgent right now. And I know that I've got a next stage of my life I've got to prepare for, and I have to think about, and what am I going to do? And am I going to volunteer? And, you know, how much travel will I be able to afford? All of these things, you know, I'm retiring as a teacher, so it's not like my career has enriched me in some huge way. So, uh, you know, right now, I've got those sorts of changes to think about. But when I look back at my time as in the professional world and as an adult, what time isn't a time of change? No, I think sometimes we can see stages and we like to think in decades because that's a way of ordering it. But change can come unexpectedly too, right? It can be serendipitous. And so in a way you have to prepare yourself. You have to have some inner resources already developed and strong in order to help you through those times that really throw you into a loop. So, and I'm sure that right now at your point in your life, you know, you're also at a stage and you're thinking about that and how you want to develop during this part of your life. And what, where you're going to put your creative forces. I want more time to think and write. Because I find that even now, and even though it's the summer and I'm not teaching right now, I'm still recovering from the academic world. It's not like you can turn something off and turn something on a dime. You can't do that. So right now I'm kind of in restoration mode from getting through an academic year. And the summer isn't long enough to do some of the things I want to think about and write about. So I'm really looking forward to unleashing some of my creativity. And I'm probably going to teach 2 more years and then let somebody new come in and bring that new energy and new ideas into our department.
Ma'am, I would love to see you vlog or post something through social media. So student like me, learners like so many like me all over the world could always get the, I don't know, fortune of learning from you. So please keep posting your blogs. I would love to see that because your post itself, they're so encouraging, uplifting, whether you are spending time with your grandkids or your furry babies. Those are very, they're joy to see and they nourish us inside. And having said that, since we are almost at the time, one thing I would like to share to you, since your present itself is a huge, huge birthday gift for me, one more birthday gift I have given to myself, and I would like to share that to you first in person. I recently, this week, I have joined Harvard Medical School for the certification in wellness and nutrition.
Oh, that is fantastic.
And
Congratulations.
myself, ma'am. Thank you. And you are the first one I wanted to share because this wellness journey, whether it is not only physical, but emotional and all this holistic area, I would love to work further, learn further. And you are the first one I shared, ma'am. And
Oh, that is happy news. I am so pleased for you. That is fantastic.
thank you so much, ma'am. And please keep posting, keep sharing. I like the things that you have shared because you have that personality that so many would benefit to learn from all across the world. And I would love to be that. I would love to be in your Facebook class as well. So much for your time today.
Thank you. It was so beautiful to see you. Not just as a still picture in Facebook, but to watch your animated face and to see you thinking on your feet like this and responding back and forth. It brings 20 years zooming into the present. It's just phenomenal. It's great. It was just great seeing you.
Thank you, ma'am, so much.
So let's keep in touch.
Yes, ma'am, will do. And I'll be like asking you, requesting you for your blogs now. I love when you speak, when you share. And thank you for the opportunity.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Bye, everyone.